literature, our own policies, but also what other communities are doing. So that's what I'll talk about. And maybe just to open, I noticed in the Planning Institute of BC's newsletter that they sent this month that they talked about agriculture planning, and they said that it's still a relatively new in BC, that the first plan started in the mid-90s, and as of this year there's about 49 local governments that have completed some form of agricultural strategy. So, you know, of the, I think it's like 180 municipalities, there's only about 50 that have done this kind of planning work. I noticed in the literature that there's a distinction between traditional versus non-traditional farming, with non-traditional being described as the more urban, smaller lot type of farming that we're seeing come on the scene in a big way, that kind of urban agriculture. And also it was interesting to see that I was asked to kind of talk, I'd say, on the more non-traditional farming, and then Peter was asked to talk on the more traditional farming with that other body. Local governments have to consider a wide range of factors in setting policy and regulating for agricultural land uses. They have to consider the land and the space for that use, the farming and the food production itself as a use, which may be separate than actual growing. The processing may be a separate activity. The distribution networks, the buying and selling, when people are coming to your farm to come and buy, there may be perceived disturbances in the neighborhood with all the parking and all that, so that's one of those really mundane types of considerations you have to consider. Food waste and recovery, that's really huge, all the organic waste from it. And then there's an education component, which some governments get involved with or not. There's something called the Right to Farm Act. I don't know how familiar people are with that. I'm still not that familiar with it. It's also called the Farm Practices Protection Act, and it allows farmers to conduct their activities on ALR lands, so agricultural land reserve lands, and lands zoned as agricultural use. They have some exemptions from some environmental regulations and some building regulations, so it's seen as quite a powerful act. But local governments can still prohibit some forms of agricultural, so let's say intensive types of forms like contained animals or abattoirs or something like that.
Big farms downtown.
Exactly. So I noticed in the literature that there was one document that did a scan of how municipalities were addressing food security across the country, and they kind of broke it down into 6 different kind of typologies. So at the range of municipalities being the driving factor, you have exactly that, them being the driving factor, financed and driven by council and staff with advice from external groups. We have a model where, then the next model would be a hybrid model with direct links to government, so civil society and staff with a conduit to council, and this has still financial support, municipal endorsements, and structural links. And then there's a hybrid with just a little bit less support. And then there's a different kind of typology of food policy organizations linked to government through a secondary agency, possibly through something like a social planning council or other committees or a provincial agency. And then more towards the, I don't want to say bottom, but the other end of the list, which is where I felt like the City of Courtenay more fits in, is the civil society organization with limited government funding and participation. So they gave the example even of a round table that governments may participate in and may provide grants. So that's what I felt like Courtenay, that's what's being asked right now, is Courtenay's participation in the round table, which I think we'll probably go through. And then finally a civil society organization with no connections to government, but that's not advised at all. So it was just interesting to see where we fit, where Courtenay might fit on that spectrum. And then I noticed in the literature that food policy councils can have many different functions, which it sounded like the Food Roundtable was in the process of doing, was allowing for a format just to start the conversation, to create opportunities for collaboration across particularly this urban-rural divide. I guess there's very diverse needs there. Analyze, influence, and support policy, and then create or support existing programs, such as, let's say, a community garden program in the community. Whoa, 2 minutes already. That's insane. Okay, so I'm going to go right to what the city can explore further. Yeah, that was insane. Okay, so I talked internally with some other staff, and we said, what are things that the city can do to help support? So we can do a land inventory suitable, looking at our public lands that are suitable for agriculture, and I know we're going to meet on that on Tuesday. We have GIS capability now, so we can do that. Create a program for use of public spaces for agriculture, so using things like agreements and standards to make it clear what is expected of people when they're using parks for gardens. Now, that's assuming we get support for it, but this is something we can go down that path. And edible landscaping. We can work with our parks department to explore that. We absolutely can. I know there's often a perception that it's a lot of maintenance to do edible landscaping, so does that mean more funds, or is there a community component to maybe helping with the maintenance? Who knows? That's something we can look at. We can conduct a policy and zoning bylaw review to address if there are any barriers to food production. So, for instance, we don't have any zoning that permits farm gate sales in urban areas, so unless you already have the farm status, and then that's only allowed on the larger lots larger than an acre. So we actually almost have like no policy language at all around these smaller the new urban farming thing. So I mean, it's just kind of a gap. And so if there's no policy and no words in the zoning bylaw, it's like kind of prohibited. So I mean, that's when you want to have yeah, kind of it's prohibited. So you want to have language around that to allow it to happen. We could ensure that agricultural food processing be permitted in industrial zones. I know sometimes that's not always clear, so maybe like the yogurt guy. We can make sure that bees and other livestock, because bees I guess are considered livestock, could be allowed in other agricultural or other zones other than just the agricultural zones. I did want to mention that we did do a survey in 2010 asking our citizenry if they'd support urban chickens. Yes. And it was opposed, with 61% opposed. So we got a response rate of 22% of around 10,000 people who were solicited. So at that time, that was the thinking. We can reduce development fees for agricultural uses, and that was the director's idea. He's like, we could make it easier by making permit fees less. So I was like, that's great. We could exempt greenhouses in urban areas from lot coverage restrictions. You often can't cover your entire lot with buildings and things, but maybe if it's for greenhouses, we could relax that. And then we could require land uses governed by development permits, so let's say multifamily residentials to areas to have community garden requirements and to require edible landscaping. So those are areas that we're not working on, but it's they looked promising from a staff perspective. So I'll leave it at that because I know I'm already over my time. So yeah, thank you.
For the past 15 years, she's been the community nutritionist for Vancouver Island Health for the North Island, and her work is primarily in health promotion and public health. With that perspective is what she's going to bring to this talk. And most of her life has been spent on issues around food access and availability.
I was asked to talk about some of the things that VIHA does. And so one of the things that we do is through the Community Food Action Initiative, which was an Act Now program and has continued on with the funding, we are able to fund and work with 8 communities groups around the island to develop this network and build capacity to be able to bring communities together to talk about food security and to support that work. But it needs to, even though it's called a hub, it's merely a networking hub. And so quite often for their projects, or always for their projects, it's not VIHA money that's paying for, say, the cooking program that's done here with the kids. That is other funding. And so every hub has to get other funding to support their individual projects. Unfortunately, there just isn't that much money in the kitty. And the other thing is that as part of the Healthy Families BC, provincially, one of the strategies is that health is to link with municipal governments around developing capacity for healthy public policy. And some of that healthy public policy includes food policy. And in that respect, I actually, over the last many years, actually they finally put it into, I got support for it with the Healthy Families, but for the last many years I've been working with the Social Planning Council in Campbell River, and we just developed, or they went through a process to develop their Sustainable Official Community Plan, and we were able to get food security into that plan. And there's a number of things, both through their agricultural plan and their agricultural advisory committee, and also actually in as food security as part of their social plan as well. They're there. And so there's things like community gardens and edible landscaping, and actually, so it's in the Sustainable Community Plan, it still has to get into bylaw. But the first step is to get it into the plan, and then they get people to support it, to advocate for it, and get it on the priority list. Right? So it's a start. But apart from that, I actually work, as I said, in health promotion and in population health. And as part of that, the community nutritionists in BC, through all the health authorities, when the new Public Health Act came in 2005, we were the group of people that was instrumental in getting food security onto the health agenda, where there is a core program for food security, which enables us to work on things like that and to promote things, and provided that got the money for the CFAI programs and stuff like that. But at the same time, one of the things that we do is we work with the general population. And this group of people, all of you, are pretty savvy about food and food security and where it comes from and how to produce it and that. But when you look at the overall population of the Valley, or even BC, a good 40% of them, to them, fruits and vegetables are maybe a banana and an orange and some tomato sauce. And they don't necessarily connect the tomato sauce with the tomatoes that are grown. And so part of our job is to build that food literacy in the population so that they can learn about food, so that and we do that by working through preschoolers and school-age children and with adults, and promoting programs and actually encouraging programs to include food in them and opportunities to learn about food. And so when you think about, there's that continuum. First, you have to be familiar with the food. So you have to know where it comes from. So you have to know that there's different names for foods as a child. You're likely to ask for Fruit Loops because you see it on TV all the time. Mm-hmm. But if you don't know the name for an apple, you're not going to ask Mom to buy it in the store or at the market. And so you do it through building capacity and building literacy. Then you start to build a knowledge of where food comes from and seasonality and local. And then you start to build the skills to do it, to just basic kitchen skills. Then you move on so that you can actually independently develop a meal, cook, a few things, put foods together. And you've learned that you might have your own kitchen and be able to put the tools together and be inclined to do that. And you start to learn how to work with groups and work with other people who are interested, and you pass on some of your knowledge and you're looking at your cultural foods. And then gradually you get so interested in food that you're looking and you're working with people in the community around food. And so that's what we work on. We work on building capacity for people to then be interested in food, to know about it, be interested in it, take part in it, advocate for local food, to have that capacity. And so that's what a lot of our work in food security is now. It's changed a bit over the years, but that's where we do most of our work now. At the same time, we build information, and the other part of it is health literacy, so that people can begin to see what risks are, what they're willing to take, what's safe, what isn't, what they're willing to accept as risk. And so then they're able to advocate for things like chickens in urban areas because they understand about where the risk is, and you don't just have this sort of dividing line. The few people that are really educated and want it, and of the 22% that came out, the larger number that was against it for whatever reasons. And so that's our role within VIHA. And am I right on time? Oh. Perfect. Is there a question? Did you want to ask a question?
Does anyone have a question? Otherwise,
no, just I think it's great, teaching kids from when they're little, this is whatever food.
Mm-hmm. But you have to understand, it's not just the kids.
Yeah, right.
We now are on about two generations of people that have not been eating food from scratch, that was built from scratch and so it's not just those children, it's their parents. Yeah. Do I have a minute to tell a story? One of my colleagues, not a nutritionist, but a colleague in VIHA, came to me a few years ago and said, I just made a pot roast. And I said, oh, great, great. She said, yeah. She said, Martha told me how to do it. She saw it on Martha. And then she turned to me and she said, but you know what always bothers me is how does Martha know how to do that? And I said, well, she's only a little bit older than me. I had to admit that. And she probably learned how to do it from her mother. And she said, really? My mother doesn't make pot roast. I'm giving her a little bit more airy. She says, and then a few weeks later, she started to walk away and she goes, you know how to make pot roast? So that's it.
There's more than 450 farms in the Comox Valley, the surrounding areas. So we are blessed. We take new farmers and grow them into farmers that no longer need the farmers market, and then they go out and do wholesale or a variety of other ways to sell their product. That doesn't mean that's the only role we play, but that's one of the major roles we've played over the last 20 years. The farmers market's been active for 21 years now. 3 of those farms, of all the farms that come to the farmers market, are sustaining themselves with farming. Out of all those farms, everybody else has the majority of their income coming from off-farm income. Our farmers produce a huge variety of vegetables and fruits. We also are lucky enough to have meat growers at our farmers market so that we can provide food, local food year-round, providing you choose to eat meat. We also have lots of dairy and eggs. That looks crazy, that number, but that's because Natural Pastures has a ton of different cheeses, and that's why that's built into that. And we also have someone, or we did, she went to Alberta to work, making maple syrup at the farm last year, which is great. Hopefully we'll get some more of that coming. We have a variety of different growing methods happening at the farmers market. And one of the things that the farmers market does very well is allow farmers to talk to you about their growing methods. We don't, as a market, ask farmers to grow in a particular way. There's no, aside from signage, there's no limit or parameters on how you grow your food. If you want to sell it at the farmers market, that's up to you. So it's up to customers as individuals to develop a relationship with the farmers they want to shop from and find out what they're doing and how they're doing. And we'll see later in the show in the slideshow that's a lot of the reason why farmers come to the farmers market. So obviously one of the main reasons is to make sales. But the second biggest reason, or actually in fact it's the slightly larger reason, is building customer relationships. So the farmers market is an opportunity for a new farmer to come, bring product, and have people go, what is that? I don't know what that is. I don't want to buy it. It kind of freaks me out, or whatever. I've never seen it before. Or to say, wow, that's really neat. How do I use it? And get that direct customer feedback, which is invaluable for farmers. And you don't get that at a grocery store. Chances are, if you're growing enough for a grocery store, they want carrots, potatoes, onions, you know, the same old, same old. So that is a huge bonus that we offer to our vendors. The next one, the next highest priority for our farmers is branding themselves as a local farm, so that when they do get big enough to start providing local retail outlets or having farm gates, you already know who they are. So you already recognize Pattison Farms label, or you already recognize the Eat More label, or you already recognize whoever it is that you end up seeing elsewhere. This is just an indication of how important market sales are to new farmers. 43% generally, about half of their farm income comes from farmers market sales. So those farmers who are at the farmers market really depend on those sales we have. So please come, even if it's raining. Our farmers at capacity. because, and this is interesting, was interesting to me for two reasons. One is that more of them said they were at capacity than I knew when we did the survey. And I believe that that's because they're aging and they either can't work any more of their land or they can't produce anymore just because they're at their own physical capacity. The other reason that they, and the other piece of the puzzle is 21% of them would like to produce more but can't. And the reasons they can't are time, so labor, or working a full-time job off farm and then having to farm in the evenings, or money for land and inputs. So what can we do to support the farmers market? And I use these two because Anera, which one is that? Amina, is the face of up-and-coming farmers in the valley, and Steve is the face, pardon me, of the older generation of farmers. And I love Steve, but he's been at the market for 20 years. And so what he brings to the market is quite different from what a new farmer brings. Steve brings, if any tomato you've ever tasted, you can go to Steve and say, I tasted this type of tomato and I thought it was blah, blah, blah. And he'll tell you 7 other different varieties of tomatoes that you could grow because you like the flavor of that one, or how you should eat this. I actually went to a tomato tasting at Steve's house and it was amazing. So that's the wealth of knowledge that those farmers offer. Which brings me to what we can do individually to support the farmers market. So obviously the first thing is to shop at the market. But the second thing is to talk to vendors about what you want, what you like, what you don't like, what you think we should do differently. Talk to the market managers. Tell me what you think would make the farmers market better. Tell me what you think is not working or what is working. Try and balance it out with the good and the bad. That always helps. Talk to the board of the farmers market. The board is run by vendors at the farmers market. There's 2 in the room here today, or there's 1, sorry, board member in the room today and another vendor at the farmers market in the room today. So talk to them about what you think about the market and how it could be better. Volunteer at the market because it's really fun and it's only 3 hours. It could be 1 hour. It could be 20 minutes that you come and hang out at the table with us. We'd love to have you. Join the board of directors. When we launch our supporter memberships, please buy one. And most of all, fill out the surveys so we know what you're thinking and we can get your feedback. As food security organizations, create a local linking land and future farmers system here, please. Somebody. Because I have farmers at the market who have land and would love somebody else to be growing on it. We have an aging farmer, everybody has an aging farmer problem. And in order to get new people onto the land, that's part of the way we can do it. Encourage local procurement policies for municipalities, regional districts, hospitals, and other government organizations. Bring your organization to the farmers market via the community table. Support our goal for a permanent indoor-outdoor farmers market and more facility when we figure out what that looks like. Educate around local food. I think the thing that encourages people to shop at the farmers market is when they know, when they've grown some of their own food, when they've experienced local food, that's when you start to get people supporting local farms. People who shop in grocery stores and have not ever experienced growing their own food or tasting a vine-ripened tomato from their backyard or from their neighbor's backyard don't care. They're not interested in the farmer's market. But once you have that experience of growing your own food and tasting real food, then you start to care. And that's how we drive people to shop locally for food. Yes, educate around local food. Grow a little tiny garden in your yard. You probably all do. To share with your kids. And partner with us on local food programs. And consider this, the Comox Valley Farmers Market was started by farmers for farmers. It's governed by the farmers and vendors who sell there. And this has proved to be a successful model for 20 years. Doesn't mean that's the way it has to be forever. Because it's for farmers from farmers. And so whatever changes and ideas we might have as consumers or market managers or anybody else, those policies, those commitments we ask them to make have to work for farmers.
Majority of your financial, notice I didn't say banking, financial transactions at a credit union. Good. And how many of you buy the majority of your fuel, if you buy fuel for your leaf blower, just kidding, at the co-op gas station? Okay, good, excellent. So first I'd like to acknowledge the fact that women have always been, and we are becoming a more powerful force, not only in the world in general, but farming in particular. 85% of agriculture in the world is done by women. Note when you go to conferences, note when you participate in things like this, how powerful of a force women are in it. We have much we can learn from them. Thank you, you wonderful beings. I'm very much who I am today because of my mother. Thank you to her. I'm now 4 years older than my mother was when she passed because she was a super person and, you know, yeah, didn't take good care of herself. Lack of boundaries. Working on that one. How can you tell I don't have them? So what I'll tend to do is I'll tend to go through, first I want to talk a little bit about the work that I have done and that we do, just to give you a sense of, you know, why we believe that we could be some value to groups like this, just from an experiential place. And then I will also endeavor to tell some very quick stories. I turned 54 this week. And Nicole and I, you know, have a farm where we grow 16,000 pounds of vegetables, 90% of which goes to the Bone Road Farmers Market, which we created 6 years ago. I'd like to mention in Nanaimo, 20 years ago, there was virtually no farmers market, and there was no yoga, and no yoga studios, and no yoga mats, and there was certainly no Lululemon. But now we have 18 to 20 yoga studios, right? Okay. In the self-same way, now we have 4 farmers markets, and we have young farmers in their 20s and 30s. Right? So these are huge, huge changes. This is very positive that we have this kind of progress. So at the same time, we have all these barriers. And so what I like to focus on, and please tell me when I'm at 5, is that I'll try to speak more about solution then rather than problem. Because we all like to hear positive things because a lot of us are on Facebook. I have 2,600 friends on my Facebook. We manage 4 Facebook pages, 4 websites. And as and it was mentioned, we also publish a magazine, Break Even. We'll leave some behind. You think I should take a breath? Breathing and eating and sleeping is for the weak. But anyway, how many farmers in the room? And those who are not farmers, how many of you grow food yourselves? Excellent. And those who are not growing food, how many of you are not growing food? Almost everybody. And so one of the things that I want to focus on is closing the gap between the talking and the acting, right? Because the fact of the matter is, you know, I've never seen or heard so much about local food in my life. It's just mind-blowing. But at the same time, you know, less than 1% of people shopping at farmers markets. And, you know, we're in Nanaimo at the VIH grounds, the oldest agricultural fair in Canada. But it has a mini golf, and it has a lot of other things and a lot of other barriers to farming. And right nearby is the Ministry of Forest, Ministry of Environment, the City of Workshart, and the list goes on, in the hospital nearby. Any one of those organizations could clean out a market in 20 minutes. So why is it not selling out, right? Why have we turned away numerous farmers that Nicole and I have trained that came to us, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, within the last 2 years? It used to be just 1 couple a year. Now we're at 6 to 7 couples. Show up at our door through Facebook, hearing about us, seeing on the front page, the district of Lanceville jumping to the side. District of Lanceville spent $100,000, $80,000 to $100,000 in the last 2.5 years trying to shut down our urban farm, and we're at a stalemate, and we are now moving for a whole bunch of reasons, and that's fine. On to other things. We need to conserve our energy, and if you burn out as an activist, you're not only no good to yourself, but you will not get any work done. You will just go into oblivion as an angry, bitter, cancer-riddled person. Do you see how I said that with a smile? Angry, bitter, cancer-riddled person. Right? How did I do that? Right? Well, it's the schizophrenia. Did I just say that? No, you said that. Okay, just kidding about the schizophrenia. But you can tell, you can see the ADD, ADHD. That's the beauty. All the comedians are that way. Otherwise, they couldn't do that. Okay, coming back. So, farming. I'd like to see the gap close between all of the hearing about local food and all the things we're reading and all the things we're saying and actually doing it. And I can't believe I'm standing in one spot. I'm doing that for you, by the way. Normally, I just run back and forth. Oh, how can even my brain work standing still? And so some quick stories, just in terms of metaphor. So Nicole and I, urban farming, residentially zoned land, been there 13 years, 16,000 pounds of vegetables. I mentioned 90% of those go to the farmer's market, no farm gate, but for a whole host of reasons, predominantly cultural. It's the culture I want to shift, and just jumping back for a moment in terms of my own history, Friends of Clackamas Sound, Wilderness Committee, ran for City Council in Nanaimo, ran provincially in the provincial election 2 elections ago. So always been very politically, so I refer to myself as a socioeconomic, environmental, political activist and ardent feminist. And so I've discovered that food, farming, farmers markets, and farmland are the most powerful way to actually change the world, which is why I'm here right now, and which is why I'm so excited that you're here and why we're here together, because all of you folks are changing the world just by sitting here and considering how you can be involved personally and involve others. Like just jumping to the planner, you know, if that survey for the chickens had been taken in a different neighborhood or a different sampling, you would have got a very different result. Nanaimo now is allowing for 5 chickens. So, so surveys, there needs to be a little more thought. And I'd like to see all 3 governments get out of the way of farming. And so some quick stories. Okay, so we got, the nuisance thing, and then we got the, illegal zoning thing, and you have to shut down, are we 5? Okay, et cetera. The mayor at the time, which is now gone. Yes. He actually called the Minister of Agriculture and had the ministry ordered, visit out of the legislature. Yeah, an inspection. And then the Minister of Environment. And then the Vancouver Island Health Authority came to our house 3 times water testing. They were all the ministries, by the way, the employees, they were amazing. Thank you. Thank you for people who do their very best to be the very best in what they do. It's the political culture that needs to change, and we've seen that across Canada now. Something needs to desperately shift in soon. So example, we start the farmer's market. The very first day I get this panic call from the manager I just hired, who was an experienced manager for the Coquitlam Beach Farmer's Market, and he's panicking on the phone because all the vendors are all revving their engines, wanting to set up on the very first day of a farmer's market 6 years ago, and here comes someone from the city of Nanaimo and walks up to the, I'm walking away from the camera, sorry about that, and says, you talk to me first, you don't have a business license. Could you not come back next week? And so in a panic, he gets someone, gives car keys to someone, gives money to someone, and someone races to City Hall to get us a business license. I understand the law and I understand the rule, but all the government agencies, especially people like local ones like VIHA and the district and the city, need to think about what the spirit and intent is. So here we are, we have leaf blowers and Harleys with no exhaust pipes and barking dogs and all these other incredible infractions that are legal, actually, so they're not infractions, sorry about that. Leaf blowers are legal, but you can't hear. That's legal. Commercial value. Food production, dangerous, poisoning the environment, right? Just wiping out the, just destroying the neighborhood, ruining the property values, yeah. Yeah, those damn chickens. Old ladies being taken down, 2 minutes already. Old ladies being taken down by pit bulls, right? Chickens. Kick your eye out. Okay? Last year we were told by the VX people who sublease from the, we have to have insurance, we have to this, we have to that. And then they said, oh, you can't have the farmer's market space this year because, that's being used for something at VIX. So we go to the VIX on the Friday to see the animals when they're less cranky because they're usually pets and suddenly they're in cages. And here what's set up in the farmer's market ground, which didn't need to be set up on Wednesday night when we have our farmer's market from 4 to 6:30. The most successful farmer's markets are the shortest, the least successful, or the longest. Don't make that face. I know I'm going off track here. But don't do that. That's very distracting. I had to say that. Thank you. And so we go there, and here's a 16-foot high thing made of plywood, and here's some men in their 40s and 50s, and they've got little racing cars with battery powered, and that's what they're using for the farmer's market ground. They've cut right through the sod, and they've made ruts, and they've left screws and wood and everything else behind, and that's what displaced the farmer's market. So this is the kind of cognitive dissonance where we talk about farm protection, we talk about bylaws, we talk about local food, we talk about movement, we talk about tourism and ecotourism and all of these things. So the gap between the talking and the, Nicole and I have been on the front page 20 times. We were in the newspaper 150 times in 1 year. This week alone, I was interviewed 4 times just about our house being sold, including by the Globe and Mail and 2 TV stations. So local food is obviously in people's minds, right? Obviously. And the fact that farmers markets are growing, obviously. So how do we bridge the gap between this fact that less than 1% of people are shopping at farmers markets, and that 85% of farmers have an off-site job, and the average farmer is 55 years of age, and 75% of farmers are going to retire in less than 15 years, right? and that we're flooded with stuff from China, and honey from China that says product of Canada, because it was put in bottles in Canada. How do we bridge the gap? And so, how much time I have left? 30 seconds? I'm out? Okay. Can I have 30 more seconds? Now you see why I talk fast. Is the actions that we take as individuals and get behind lovely people like Nancy and feed her lovely information about all the other places in Canada that already have urban chickens and already have an urban bylaw that is functioning, and send her copies of the actual bylaw and support her. And then when you elect people to council, you support them and you show up when they make a motion and you get behind them. We don't just say, I supported you, I voted for you, I pay taxes for you, and we support our people and our leaders on every level, in every place, to move the agenda of changing the world using food, farmers, markets, farmers, and farmland. Thank you.
What's the criteria for allowing farmers in there? Do you mind standing up?
I just want standing up. If you're a farmer, you're allowed in. If you grow your own food, you're allowed in.
Well, that would exclude bakers then.
Bakers and processors and concessions and herbalists are limited by our market mix. So depending on how many total vendors we have, we allow a certain percentage to be bakers, a certain percentage processors, a certain percentage blah, blah, blah. But farmers are unlimited.
Do you still have a rule about the size of the business? If somebody has a retail establishment, they're prevented?
If you have an established retail outlet, then you are excluded from the market, yes.
And do farmers have to have farm status on their property?
No.
And do you do price controls on products, on produce and things?
No.
So that's done individually or by the farmers themselves, amongst
Yeah.
themselves?
Yeah. I think they're sort of self-policing in that way. But I don't know the insides.
Linda? Is there any rule about giving out brochures and signing petitions?
What we encourage people to do, we very often have several groups at both entrances to the farmers markets. At times, actively pursuing individuals to sign petitions or take a pamphlet or notice this or that. And so what we ask people to do instead is to come in and be at our community table so that people can choose to come and talk to you rather than be at the entrance.
Oh, so at the community table,
Yes.
we can put brochures.
You can talk to me about coming to the market, and you would have your own table and your own setup with your organization and whatever idea you're trying
You
to.
can only do that once, right?
Nope,
No?
you can do it multiple times, depending on how much space I have.
Can I just add to what you said?
Yes.
So just two small additions. One is for people's learning. The vast majority of farmers markets in North America, the number one rule is make it, bake it, grow it. Different markets enforce that to a different degree. We do have some pricing. We're very careful with that because otherwise it's called unfair competition and it's federally illegal, and there have farmers markets have been sued because they actually had what was called price fixing, even like vendors going to each other and agreeing what price to set on the things. What we have is a minimum pricing strategy. So as part of the package the vendors get, they have a sheet which Nicole and I made up 6 years ago by going to grocery stores and farmers markets and saying, you know, eggs, minimum $5. So if you want to sell your eggs for $8, it's fine. And one of the reasons that happened is we had resellers where people would go to like a wholesale place or to a farm and they were reselling, and it's just destroying the market, and she threatened with CPC and with lawyers, and it got very ugly, and my own board was like concerned and wanted me as president to apologize, and I stood my ground. And so 6 years later, not only did we survive that debacle, but we get calls from managers and vendors from all around Vancouver Island because we are almost food only other than a couple of soap people. And so we have really held the line to support farmers and agriculture in our farmers market, and the customers need to make the adjustment rather than how do we please the customers. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And we're similar. We just do food and agricultural products. We don't do anything else.
Are there a growing number or an encouraging growing number of families using the food voucher system for farmers
Yes,
markets?
the nutrition coupon program, which is administered by the BC Association of Farmers Markets, and here in the Valley, the Healthy Families program,
I don't know how many more families we'll be able to give coupons to this year, but it's definitely increased. The program as a whole has almost doubled the amount of nutrition coupons going out, but it's all over BC, so that they've added a whole bunch of new markets. So we were the lead market in terms of market distribution and redemption. So we had a 98% redemption at our market, which is amazing.
That's really good.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And it brought in $13,000 worth of revenue to our farmers market that never would have been there without that program.
And one of the reasons they get demonstrated that Healthy Families program actually provides transportation
And they distribute the coupons at the market. So we've actually gone on the road and encouraged other communities to do the same thing.
And if I may actually, otherwise the 13,000 is, we also got people to the farmer's market that had never and probably would never have attended a farmer's market. We're talking like single moms with 3 young children, First Nations on foot, walking to the bus with bags. So heartwarming, changed their lives, just these little coupons.
Yeah, amazing.
Who gets those coupons?
Healthy Families.
Healthy Families is Comox Valley Family Services
Yeah.
has the Healthy Families program, which includes the prenatal program and the young farmers program.
I can vouch for that program. I joined that program when I first moved to the valley, and I had my son here and didn't know anybody, and that was one of my first groups of access was the Healthy Families Baking program. And the motivation to go and to continue to go was the lunches that were served. So if you know of anybody else who's in that situation, it was a great place to launch from within the baby.
They run an amazing program down there, yeah.
We only have a couple more minutes, so does anyone else have a question?
I was just wondering, is it possible to extend the hours of the farmer's market, say open until 2 in the afternoon, maybe to get more people in?
That question has been debated at every board for 20 years.
Yeah.
Right now, the market is very successful in its 3-hour span, and so it's hard to convince a farmer to leave their farm for more than what ends up being a 6-hour day at the market for them anyway, to just sell for 3 hours, to stay there longer. And we require that the farmer who's growing the food sells the food. So that's the impediment. We're trying to make it work for farmers, and farmers just can't afford to be there that long. Having said that, your suggestions are always welcome, and yes, I think that's
May I answer that one? So the most successful markets in North America are short markets. The least successful ones are long markets. The long markets pander more to, wanting to make more money and have the customers come whenever they want. The short markets teach the consumer they need to get there. I understand that's hard for some people with the hours they work. And then, as was already said, we've been going the night before. We've been going since early in the morning. We picked all day, so it's a day and a half effort for us. Plus the wilting factor, and it's too much teaching the wilting factor. Teaching people that they can experience the same thing they do at Superstore. They can get what they want, when they want, at the price they want. So it's actually it's not shifting the culture. It's actually supporting the existing paradigm. So it's very important to encourage. And further to that, to affirm that fact, is we have half of our vendors are driving an hour and a half, which I don't want. We don't let vendors in Courtenay go, I love them, from Duncan, and they're more successful financially at our market on a Wednesday, 4 to 6:30, than they are on a Saturday. Downtown Duncan, a 20-year-old market, their clientele, their hometown, in the market square, and they're making more money in 2.5 hours than a 5-hour market on Saturday or a 5-hour market in Courtenay, just as an indicator from our market perspective.
What percentage of our markets do they sell out, our farmers? Or at the end of the day, are people selling out again?
This year, yes. Yes.
I have just a quick question. I work for an agency, Creative Employment Access Society, otherwise known as the Job Shop here in town. And I was curious about your concept of the grow a farmer, sort of this demographics that Dirk has also mentioned, that the farming community is starting to wilt, and let's grow farmers. And I'm wondering if you could expand on that concept and maybe jump in a bit too, Dirk, and then I would like to bring that back to the employment agency.
The thing I refer to as Linking Land and Future Farmers. It's called LAF, and I experienced it in Victoria. And I think that's where it's based on for the whole island. Somebody else could correct me if I'm wrong. And what it does is build a database of existing agricultural land or arable land, and then it links new farmers to that land, and they work out whatever deal they can with that landowner to farm on that land. So
We
I
have
have
started that here.
awesome. So I have farmers that I want to hook up to that, and yeah, that's my hope.
Connect that to them.
Yes, or
Yes, and we need every level of that. So we need that federally for people that say who have just finished university and they want to move to BC because that's where their family already lives. We need that provincially, as we already do. Then we need that regionally. It doesn't have to be called LAF, or it could be called something else, or it could be called the regional version. And then we also need that in each community, and that even that could be at 2 levels that are linked. And one level would be kind of like farmers, the people who are like doing it for a living, and then the next level would be community gardens. So whatever, like this organization here, this organization also coordinates or is an umbrella for the community gardens. Those people have one at a, I don't want to say lower level, at a micro level, because they're maybe just wanting to grow in each other's backyards. And there's so many people who are aging or don't have the energy or don't have the health, but they'd love to have that being done in their backyard and benefit from some of the produce. So we need that network, and that needs to be go on to a map and onto a website, and all of this will link us all together so we're working together.
yeah. And there is a tax benefit for people if you produce food on your land. If you sell a certain amount of it, you get agriculture status, which really helps.
To add to that piece about young farmers is, I was a farm apprentice, and I feel like I'm talking to, I don't know. So I was a farm apprentice, and that's where I got started in farming, and then so 9 years later I was farming my own place, and I farmed many other places in between. And just speaking from my own perspective, and now I have my first farm apprentice, and it's actually kind of illegal. Like, it's not, we need some changes provincially around labor standards, because there is a case in Mill Bay where farmers were just sued for minimum wage back pay, even though they had an agreement, a verbal agreement with their apprentices, and they didn't. So it's like you have to, so we need formalized farmer training programs, and we do have a fantastic national organization called SOIL, and so it's soilapprenticeships.org, and it's fantastic, but at the same time we're vulnerable, us farmers are vulnerable to this sort of lawsuit stuff that we obviously don't need. And the other piece is that, you know, with people leasing land to farmers, there needs to be some serious capacity building in those folks to understand what they're actually agreeing to. It might be messy, it might be a little stinky, it might not, they might not be able to control everything that happens on their land. So it's just, there's just a lot of work to do around this training and land access stuff, and we're like at square one, and we really need to, it's a huge issue. Yeah.
I know, sorry, Sheila hasn't spoken yet.
I just wanted to say that our Zina's been in touch with me about the school system and training programs for students, and that we have a lot of schools now with gardens, but whether there's a really strong conceptual framework about how this might grow, it might be a path, a 21st century learning path for some students to find their passion and become farmers, especially in the valley where this is a big sector for potential employment and business. And the irony of it all, that about 6 years ago, VIHA stopped running its agricultural classes in grade 11 and 12 and dismantled its greenhouse because they thought kids were growing green, were just taking the course for grow-off. So, which I think is still learning to grow, right?
That stopped it right
Yeah,
there.
so we're just at the very beginning. It's been very hard to find an answer with either North Island College or the school district, but it would be a place for ACID programs for job placement. I'm happy to talk more on this area, and some of the things I got really excited about the Kinsman Park project in Duncan, where they've got some youth interns going, and we've talked about doing it at the Lake Trail Garden as a possibility, and we're seeing kids really do respond and want to be in the gardens and want to have and
make that their real learning experience, and we want the school gardens to be more than just planting those sunflower seeds, but actually leading in their lives. So that's another piece about linking farms and farmers, is growing farmers from kindergarten. And, but it's gonna be a long way to work our way through the grinding moils of bureaucracy on this one.
You're the end.
Yeah.
I just had one quick question for
Vickey.
Vickey.
Yes.
When you said survey, is that the survey that Hans-Peter Meyer is doing? When you suggested that we participate in surveys?
Any survey we have anytime, please, yes. So Hans is doing surveys, he's doing customer surveys right now. We also participated in a UNBC and BC Association of Farmers Markets survey system last year, which lots of you participated in, and that was great, gave us tons of great information. But we're running surveys basically all the time, and Hans is committed to doing that for us. So yes, please.
But where are they, at the market?
They're at the market, and we'll put a link on our website. I think there's a link right now to an old survey on our website, which is fine if you do that too, and we'll get his onto there as well. Yes.
Right.
Okay,
I know we want to move along, but I just wanted to remind people that Shellfish is food too, and tomorrow after the farmer's market, go to the Shellfish Festival at Comox Marina.
And tell your shellfish growers that they should be at the farmer's market selling their shellfish.
Yeah.
Hard for them to do that
Yeah, that would be.
for very many reasons, but if they, I don't know,
He
keep
got lost
having this
frozen.
conversation, but yes, there is a way, and we did have an oyster farmer for a while, but yeah.
And because Judy's come a long way, I will let you have the last one.
I just wanted to mention, if you haven't heard of Destination Conservation yet, it's a group of women out of North Vancouver. They work with the school boards, and they do these 3-year cycles. And they've been doing it in Powell River. They're on the second 3-year cycle. For example, the first year will be energy, then they'll do water, then they do food. And they come into the schools, and they actually, it goes right from elementary to high school. And the kids have to participate in programs like the club. And they learn everything from conservation of energy, and the cost savings goes to that club of kids, and then it rolls over to food. And so the Edge Hill Elementary School took the money that they've made from saving the energy from 1 year, and they planted a garden, and they now have a bicycle that they ride to power the irrigation for their garden. So I just mentioned, because it's you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Destination Conservation, you might want to connect with them, and they have the whole program already set. And it's very successful, and it's
Powell
already.
River has a sustainability charter that the regional district, the town, and the school district and the band all signed in.